for the exhibition and the programming that you're about to enjoy. The exhibition has a nice long run. It will be on until February 14th. So Valentine's Day will be a little bittersweet in 2026, but nonetheless, we're so happy to have the show for a nice long run. And we can do that because of the support of the Mobile County Commission. And we feel so fortunate that Commissioner Logan believed in this project from the very beginning. She's here with us today, so we have to give her a hand. And then our friends from the Crampton Trust are funding the programs and all the collaborations, particularly the ones too that are happening both here and offsite at the Heritage House in Africantown. Our good friends and our great partners for this exhibition. The M.J. Larkins Foundation funded the catalog, and the catalog looks beautiful, and it has Dr. Barber's spectacular essay about the Elegies series. And if you buy one today, I have the Sharpie right here in my pocket, and it's going from my pocket to Juan's hands. So this would be a great opportunity to take one home. At the City of Mobile, we receive so much support from our colleagues at Government Plaza. It makes our work both fun and if we were out here in the park on our own. And D'Ambro Chapman is here. And D'Ambro has chronicled Juan's engagement with our community since his first trip in January of 2024. He turned that into a documentary that is Hollywood quality. It's so good. It's about 12 minutes start to finish, and it is on view in the Rodney Gallery right over Joe's shoulder and Teresa's shoulder close by, and there are even cushions so you can sit and watch D'Ambro's art because he did an outstanding job. We are also fortunate that the Alabama State Council on the Arts believes in what we do and receive important funding from them. And in times like these, I encourage everybody to support, ask them, and to be a champion for their belief in the power of art. And then we've had several exhibition sponsors, Dr. Charles Rich and Sue Carney. Sue is actually leading one of our school groups right now. She's there doing her thing. And then Bill and Sandy Agerton, Alan and Timmy Oaks, and Rosalie Lockhart and Francine Pergantis contributed to help us do this exhibition. So now I'll do a little bit more of a formal introduction to Dr. Barber. She is a prize-winning, internationally recognized scholar, curator, and critic whose writing and expert commentary appears in top-tier academic journals, popular media outlets, and award-winning documentaries. Her work spans abstraction, dance, fashion, feminism, film, the ethics of representation, and she focuses on artists of the Black diaspora working in the United States and the broader Atlantic world. She's completed fellowships at Art Table, the Delaware Art Museum, the University of Virginia's Woodson Institute for African American and African Studies, and the Getty Research Institute. And that's just a brief overview of all that Dr. Barber does. In fact, she's hopping on a plane to go to Virginia next, tomorrow morning. Dr. Barber is the recipient of the Smithsonian's 2022 National Portrait Gallery Director's Essay Prize. And before joining the Art History Department at UCLA, she was an assistant professor of Africana Studies and Art History at the University of Delaware. She is also an alumna of the School of Criticism and Theory at Cornell University. So are you convinced that we got the right person for the job? All right, so Dr. Barber's going to come up. And then Juan Logan's biography is also viewable. There is a spectacular photograph of him, and it is accompanied by his bio. Juan has a career that spans 60 years, and during that time, he has accomplished so much, from major public art commissions. If you go to the Gantt Center in Charlotte, you'll see one of his public works outside there. He has art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and we are so proud to have 2 works of art in our collection from one studio to our community. So Without Stopping is on the wall right there, and at Africantown Heritage House, you'll see threads. So that is probably enough of an overview, and you'll learn more from Juan and Tiffany straight from the horse's mouth. So,
with Juan, when I got the call from John and Juan, well, I am very busy, as John said, and I missed the initial email invitation for this, and then John tracked me down via Instagram. I was like, I never do this, but I don't know if you got my email. And I was like, I did not. Let me look at my email right now. So yes, very, very honored to be here. And just such a pleasure to steep in the mobile community. I also made trips here as part of my research process for writing an exhibition catalog, spent time in Africa Town. I really wanted to kind of learn what the rhythm of Mobile was and its cadence so that I could capture that in the essay and really understand Juan's process. And that's where I want to start the conversation today, which is where the exhibition starts. And when you walk in, you see all these process shots of Juan working in his studio. And one of the things that John and I talked about early on was that I typically work with artists who are in their studio solving problems, and that's certainly Juan's ethos every day, spending time in his studio, working out these issues with materials and concepts. And so I wanted us to start the conversation there and thinking about your process and how you approach art making in general.
I just work at it.
I mean, you work very hard. You work every day.
I do. I work 7 days a week. Can you hear me okay? All right. But without stopping was special in that it required a level of research that I hadn't done in a long time. At least not that way. But loved coming down to Mobile and spending time in Africa Town. And going back and developing ideas. Initially, I was working with the wrong map of Africa Town. So the piece I created initially simply didn't work. Process-wise, it was understanding that I didn't want to deal with it historically, not really, but wanted to deal with where people started and moving forward. Not how they arrived. The boat was not that important. Who bought them here was not that important. But it's what they did with their lives afterwards. So hence the title, Without Stopping. They didn't stop. They had been freed longer than they'd ever been enslaved. And so with that in mind, it seemed easy enough to search for historical documents in terms of the clothing they were wearing, that sort of thing, and seeing them really as sort of the fabric of the community. So that's what I was working with. So you look at the piece, look at the old photographs that are present as well, and you'll find the pattern that was used to create the piece. There's an area where you can find cross-hatching of sorts of these laser cut patterns I did to create a different kind of fabric. And there's just all the heads of the people, but they created, again, the fabric of the community. And that's what the piece is really sort of all about, and how they move forward. The church is there, the interest to the church, the old church fans, so many things are part of this piece. But most importantly, the seeds that they planted in terms of the rest of humanity coming forward, or moving forward, that's all part of it as well.
Can you talk a little bit about that process of layering? Some of that is captured in the process of shots too, how you're kind of like laying things over each other, cording things off of tape. But how, I mean, I didn't realize that you had started with the wrong map. Mm-hmm. That's so fascinating to me because of how you work with memory, which we'll come back to that question and a deeper dive. But I still want to kind of stay a little bit on the surface, but even the surface of your paintings is a little bit of a gotcha moment, right? Like what you see is not everything that's there.
It's true. For years, and probably going back 40 years ago, working on a series of paintings where the paintings actually had, 70, 80 layers of paint. And they physically gained weight. I mean, they really did. But the idea being is that without those things being there, then you couldn't really talk about that surface. It's looking at, and this is sort of loosely tied to memory as well, but the whole notion that everything is happening at once. So if I only dealt with part of what was happening, then I couldn't represent what was going on in the moment. It's like talking about what's happening in America today. You can't really pull out one thing without talking about something else happening at the same time. So my painting sort of exists that way. And the idea too is that it's so important to not think of it in terms of a singular event. singular memory, or singular anything. And so I layer things, and I've always done that. Sometimes you only see a tiny bit of some of what was there at first. If that becomes equally, it's just as important. It had to be there.
And the foundation of your paintings, and we'll talk a little bit about the other kinds of work that you make, because you don't just make paintings. But the underpainting is always black. And I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about that choice. I mean, I think I know why, but I would like to hear you talk about it.
Well, it's a foundational sort of thing. It is, it anchors me in a particular kind of way. It's a jumping off point. It's, I used to, years ago, I created this small square that was reminiscent of sort of fake patent leather, and it was called Shine. And it was my way of inserting myself and every other person I knew that was a part of that into the piece. And they were always present. It's how I include my family, it's how I include loved ones, strangers. It's looking around and seeing all of us, how do you insert all of us into something? And that was my way of doing it.
I love that gesture. It's so beautiful, but you would never know that looking at these pieces. But I also think that that underpainting gives the work a certain kind of density that certainly comes to the surface because of its saturation. I mean, if you started these paintings with a white underpainting, or even just like some kind of wash of pastels or something, I mean, these works would look radically different. Yeah. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. And also the kind of like politics of blackness that you're thinking about, and also the history of abstraction, right?
True.
You're thinking about the traditions of painting, histories of abstraction. That black square made me think of Malevich. Like there are these art historical references that are also part of your work. And I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about how you approach the conceptual work through literature, because your studio is full of books, and as John said, you're always like, have you read this? Have you done this? So like, how are you, what kinds of things are you drawn to in terms of text, and how that informs your practice?
Well, I think that, so often it's more about simply knowing what has transpired, be it historically or present day. I'm reading this thing now that deals with cultural memory and Western civilization. And it's talking about, my current work is really sort of about this in a way. It's talking about monuments, it's talking about public policy. Those kinds of things talk about the whole nature of collective memory. Generally, most of these paintings deal with personal memories in one way or another. Whereas when we get to collective memory, it's addressing something very, very different. Something that's impacting each of us, all of us. Not necessarily in the same way, but we all are fully aware of what's going on. What does that begin to look like? And for me, I'm creating these monuments within my paintings now. And they appear as monuments. The backgrounds generally are sort of transient backgrounds. They're not tied down to any one thing. They're just sort of flowing through all at once. Much the same way we exist in space. We're sort of flowing through all at once.
And these new works are also part of the Elegies series, because the text on the wall text on the exhibition says, these are now numbered at 230, but they have increased.
They have increased. They're more than 250 paintings now.
And like you said, the visual language is starting to shift a little bit, and you can see the shifts in the visual language even on view in the exhibition, from like the pieces that are earlier towards the beginning of the series in 2017 to now, to the major commission Without Stopping.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that development and what that's like for you as an artist to kind of just like go with the flow of the work, and is the work leading you, and like how are you making decisions about the development of the visual language? In
a way, it really is. It's the whole idea that when I talk about everything happening at once, it's writing a novel and suggesting that where you start is where you're going to end up, and that's not the case at all. I'm trying to transport myself. I'm trying to answer questions. That's what I'm doing. I always talk about the whole notion of if you want to deepen your investigation, ask better questions. And that's really what it comes down to. So it's impossible not to, you produce a piece, it leads you to the next piece, because you answer some of those questions, but not all of them. It's always amazing to me when I talk to artists and I say, well, how many pieces in this series? They said 6. I said, okay. So you're writing just a couple of sentences, it seems. Where's the rest of it? Yeah, and when are you going to get around to that? You know, how are you going to deepen your investigation into whatever it is you're exploring? And so I spend a lot of time doing just that. I do a lot of drawings, sketches, and again, simply trying to answer questions.
That's the thing about monuments right now too, especially in the place in the South, I mean in Charlotte and Mobile, Virginia, where I'm going on tomorrow. Such a contested, fraught space, right? And also a particular kind of language that we expect.
Sure.
The equestrian or the kind of figurative, but you're making monuments, quote unquote, in a really different way that still honors your investments in abstraction. But I also think about your commitment to place. Just like you were saying that you consult maps. You have these signature motifs of the boat and the head, and so all of these things are kind of flowing together and interwoven together, and even evocative things like red, white, and blue, and the stripes on the canvas. All of this is also about the nation, and nation time, and nation building, and the narratives that we tell ourselves about ourselves. So I also wanted to hear you talk a little bit about place and the South, even as a space that, as a geography, as a conceptual space that you contribute into, but it's also it doesn't make up the whole of who you are, and what's your relationship to the South. You were born in Tennessee, so.
True enough. It's interesting. I mean, it's a wonderful question. In the other room over here, there's a painting. I think it's Elegy number 15. In that painting, there's this boat, and in that boat there are these sort of reddish, greenish clouds. And I always use clouds in the work to talk about hopes, dreams, and aspirations, and that sort of thing. But on the side, the right side of that, and below that, is a series of heads. And those heads are really about the colors of them anyway, represent the colors of our federal prison uniforms that people wear. Because when those people were incarcerated, now they had hopes, dreams, and aspirations as well. And they carried them with them. They don't always last. Rarely do they, because after a year or 2 or 3 or whatever it is, and people stop visiting, their time is extended in those prisons, and they develop new dreams. And they loosely hold on to those old things that they had with them when they went in. But I always imagine that people, regardless of where they are, when you think about space, we always have hopes, dreams, and aspirations. No matter how desperate our situation might be, it's all about that. When I did the piece at the Gantt, sometimes those monuments deal with erasure. And it's political, it's social, it's all of those things. So when I look at the piece I did for the Gantt, I made this piece, additionally it weighed about, I think it was 35 tons out of granite. And then they, of course, told me that there was a 6-story parking lot going in underneath, so I had to get rid of about 37,000 pounds of it. I said, oh, come on. So we figured out, we said, can you do that? I said, well, of course we can. I didn't know how in the moment, but you'd never say, no, you can't do it. But the important thing about the piece is that it is a big head, if you will. And what it documents is all spaces that we existed, all the African Americans existed in Charlotte, North Carolina, that are no longer there. They've simply been erased. And that's along with it in a particular kind of way. Our communities, our stores, everything. I would go as far as to say that that has happened so often throughout the South and throughout most of America, really. It's always interesting to talk about our existence. And I'm hearing it more recently than ever before, of course, but see, there's only just one American history. And all of us are a part of it. Denying any part of it is denying every part of it. There's only one American history. More than anything else, it comes down to it's about a sense of acknowledgement and our ability to come to terms with that or not, and it has nothing to do with something that happened 400 years ago, 300 years ago, 200 years ago. It's not about that. But it is really about our ability to accept this as being our history and we're moving forward from that point.
Because one of the things that we talked about the first time that we met in your studio in Belmont was the use of a particular type of tool to make these paintings,
Sure.
and how that also mimics the role, how you think about memory and its fracturing.
How it exists in space. I use a masonry trowel. That's what I paint with. And using it that way, it creates layers upon layers upon layers. And many times I put it on, I'll scrape it off, I'll expose part of it, but, sometimes very, very small amounts of it, but only because what was buried is just as important. What's seen is just as important as what is it? I think when Toni Morrison wrote Barber and Dr, that's what she was sort of getting at. So I think that I use lots of tools, but and occasionally, because if the area is small enough, I'll use a tiny brush, but not often. I think I love what I do. I really do, and it doesn't matter. I was asked last night about how long something takes, and honestly, at this point in my life, it doesn't really matter. It just doesn't. If I can do the painting in a couple of weeks, that's great. If it takes a couple of months, that's okay too. Some of the larger things can take 9 months, and that's okay. The other thing that I think is important to say here is that I don't really paint for the artists and audience. I don't really paint for exhibitions. I don't make art for exhibitions. So if the gallery says we need 15 paintings, I don't make 15 paintings for that show. When I have bodies of work in the studio that I've never been shown before. In this series, there are 48 paintings in this show, but there are another 200 in the studio. So if you need another show, we can do that. And not touch this one.
Is there a significance with the color scheme? I see that's the main consistency, just being in the room without focusing on one individual piece.
Not so much. I think what happens is that, certainly as you can tell from this room, I really enjoy red. I do. I enjoy the depth of the color. So, I either create or can choose from a wide assortment. I use golden artist colors in my practice. And
Like a sponsored athlete, like a sponsored painter. Next level.
hey, they said they would send me some color, I'm just saying.
Can you talk a little bit about your I don't know if I want to say relationship to color theory, but you are a master mixer, and how you think about the colors that you devise on your own that are not in the tube.
Right. That's ongoing as well. And when I do, I hate waste. So I always use, this is one of those old Logan things, I always use foam core palettes. They're generally cut down to about 10 by 10 or 11 by 11 inches square. And so that becomes my palette, and I work on it, I mix paint on it and all that sort of thing. And then before it's over and done with, because it's a paper surface on that foam core, I will peel that paper surface off. So I have paper surfaces that go back 30, 40 years. And I can look at the surface on that piece of paper, you see, and I know exactly which period that I worked in. Whether that painting came from the 80s, and I can match those colors. But more importantly, you just put it in some hot water and you can wash up all the paper, and there's nothing left but a sheet of paint. So I use that to collage into my, let's look at this. That's just an old, that's from one of those palettes. But I've created whole painted, big paintings. They're using the same method though, because there's nothing to paint.
When did you know that this would be your life's work?
That's a great question. When I first went to school, my brother was a pathologist, and my sister still was psychologist, sociology, So I was going to be this microbiologist. And I realized after the second day of being in school, it had nothing to do with me. Because I always enjoyed making things. I made my first sculpture, which was an eagle that had a 5-foot wingspan, carved out of white pine. And the thing that was important about it is that my school, this is in high school, my instructor told me that It didn't have to look anyone else's, it could just be mine. So I think with that in mind, I realized pretty quickly that I love that whole notion of making things. And I just simply moved forward from that point, you know. But that's when I realized that that's really what I wanted to do. So it's been a while.
Any other questions?
Yes.
I got one. At what stage in your practice did you stop taking critique?
Did I stop taking it? I haven't arrived at that place yet. The thing that's really important about what you just said, though, is that I was doing a show many years ago, and you know, people always have that little book there for
Like the address book or like the guest book?
guest book, right, for comments and that sort of thing. And the most important comment that was in that guest book, or that little comment book, the gentleman, the lady that wrote in this book was so important in my development of my career. And they simply said, you should paint better. And I took that to heart. I really, really did. And I said, you know what, you really should paint better. And from that point forward, I painted better. Because it mattered more to me. I find joy in what I do, the act of doing it. Not necessarily the joy in what I'm talking about.
So how did you navigate around that, to kind of hold to it? And what advice would you give to young people now who are contemplating this as their life's work, but they're getting that same kind of
Feedback. Oh, yeah. I was told that too. Initially, I think my dad said, well, what are you going to do to make a living? And I said, well, I'm going to sell my work. And then one of the loves of my life, that's my sister. I had moved to Kansas, and I was moving from Denver, Colorado, back east. And she had moved into this new house, and I was coming back with all my paintings and everything. And she said, well, I sure could use a few paintings for my new house. I said, I'd be more than happy to sell you a few. I said, you know, I'm trying to make a living here. Nothing personal.
Okay. This is not personal, this is business.
Come on now. But I think to answer your question, though, more honestly, I think it's the choices we make in terms of the arts generally, and it doesn't matter which discipline you're looking at. It's never easy. It's so competitive. It requires work each and every day. You look at, you go to concerts and you say, that is a wonderful show. You know, look at Beyonce. Do you think it just happens because it just happens? That's a tremendous amount of work, of practice daily to get it right, so that when you see it, it really is right and wonderful. I used to think about Prince, and I even went to see James Brown back in the day. Wonderful show, wonderful showman. You know, it didn't just happen. You know, I used to think that, and I know this sounds really, really crazy, one of my heroes back in the day was Ray Charles. I said, when I grow up, in terms of making art, I want to be as good as Ray Charles. Because he could do everything and do it well. And that didn't just happen either. That was his love of the craft. You know, he loved what he was doing and how he was doing it. I wanted to be that good. So I'm still working at it.
I think also, because, like, going back to what you said about, oh, I have work in my studio that no one's ever seen. I have bodies of work that have never been shown. I don't make art for exhibitions. It's like the commitment to, like, when you decide to be an artist, that is your life.
It is.
And that's not to say that you can't have other enterprises and, you know, work in other industries. And as somebody who teaches art history, and to my students, I'm all, you know, they're always like, oh my God, art history is in crisis. Oh my God, the discipline is dead. I'm never going to get a job as an art history major. I'm like, do you know that when you put together, when you learn how to write an exhibition proposal, that exhibition proposal can go to museums, it can go to Netflix, it can go to Live Nation, it can go to all, it's a form that gets translated to all these different industries that you are showing, demonstrating that you know how to organize information. I'm like, these are basic skills. So art, I think art making is similar, and so I think on the one hand you have the kind of commitment to being an artist and knowing that that's your identity, the craft, the practice, the discipline, reaching out to folks who could give you critique lovingly, of course, but, you know, people that you trust, building a circle of trust around you to also kind of advance your career. Tell people, hey, I'm working on, invite people to your studio. I'm working on this thing, or if you don't have a studio, meet them at the coffee shop and show them their images on your computer. I've had so many studio visits with emerging artists who are like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I want to show you what I make.
Oh,
Let's have a conversation about it. I'll ask you questions and then I'll follow up with you, or you can follow up with me. I'm very busy, but hey, hit me in my DMs, I'll probably answer. So there, you
will.
know, there is, I think, art making is such a risk-taking business that we just have to continue to commit taking those risks. And
Sure.
you're showing us how to do that so beautifully by solving these problems in your studio, and it's like knowing that like you're making work for yourself as a developmental tool for who you are and your brain and how you want to like relate to the world.
Sure.
Right? Art as a vessel for that, not just in terms of the product that you sell. Although, yes, do that too. Get
Yeah,
your
thank
point.
you. One thing that goes back to the question, though, I think is important, is that it's so easy to give up because it will get hard, and the important thing is not to. You'll be willing to stick with it as long as it takes, with whatever it takes. And at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to for me. This is what I do, and that's what I feel on a daily basis.
Could you imagine a better way to spend a rainy, bright